My father was caught in a barrier the night the river swallowed him. The villagers called it an accident. The police called it unavoidable. My mother called it fate. I was 12 years old when I watched his body dragged from the water. The barrier was old iron, rusted and bent like broken ribs. It stood across the river to stop debris during floods. That night, the rain came like punishment. The river rose faster than anyone expected. My father went out to secure the fishing nets anyway. They said his leg twisted through the iron bars. They said the current pinned him underwater. They said he drowned before he could scream. But I remember the marks on his arms. They looked like handprints. The funeral happened 3 days later. His body was swollen and gray. His eyes were stitched shut. His mouth was sealed like a secret. I touched his cold forehead and felt something wrong. He did not feel empty. He felt heavy, as if something inside him refused to leave. We buried him at the edge of the village graveyard. The soil there was damp and black. The priest rushed to prayers because another storm was coming. Thunder rolled as the coffin lowered. I swore I heard knocking. My mother told me grief makes sounds where none exist. The villagers told me to be strong. Time moved forward because it always does. Years stacked on years like forgotten stones. My mother died before she ever smiled again. I left the village when I turned 18. I built a life far away from rivers. I avoided iron fences and running water. I married, divorced, and lived quietly. The memory of my father faded into something dull and distant. 40 years passed. Then the letter arrived. The envelope had no return address. The paper smelled like wet soil. Inside was a single sentence written in shaking ink. He is walking near the barrier again. I laughed at first. Then my hands began to shake. The village name was written correctly. The spelling of my father's name was exact. Details only the dead would remember were mentioned. I returned after for decades. The village looked smaller. The river looked wider. The barrier still stood, rusted and screaming in silence. People avoided my eyes when I asked questions. An old fisherman finally spoke. He said someone had been seen at night. A tall man soaked in river water. A man who stood staring at the barrier for hours. A man whose face looked wrong. They said dogs refused to bark at him. They said lamps went out when he passed. They said the river pulled toward him. I asked where he went during the day. The fisherman crossed himself and said underground. I went to the graveyard alone. My father's grave was cracked down the center. The soil had sunk inward. Grass refused to grow there. The headstone leaned as if trying to escape. I knelt and pressed my ear to the earth. I heard water. I heard breathing. I heard my name spoken softly. That night, I stayed in my childhood home. The walls remembered me. The floorboards creaked in familiar patterns. At midnight, the sound of dripping filled the house. There was no water source inside. Footsteps moved slowly down the hallway. Each step squelched like mud. I could smell the river. Cold air brushed my face. Someone stood outside my bedroom door. He knocked once. I did not answer. He knocked again. The door handle turned by itself. The door opened with a long, wet sigh. My father stood there, or something wearing him. His skin sagged like soaked cloth. River weeds hung from his hair. His eyes were open but empty. He smiled with a mouth full of black water. "My boy," he said. His voice sounded like bubbles breaking. I was stuck. I finally got free. I screamed. He stepped forward. Water pooled at his feet. The room smelled like decay. He reached for me with trembling fingers. I asked him how he survived. He tilted his head unnaturally. "I didn't," he answered. "The barrier kept me. The river changed me." He said he waited 40 years. He said the iron would not let him go. He said the river whispered instructions. He said he followed the current underground. He said the grave was only a doorway. At dawn, he was gone. Mud covered the floor. Wet footprints led toward the river. I followed them despite my fear. The village watched from behind closed doors. At the barrier, he stood again. The iron bars were bent outward. The river moved unnaturally calm. He looked peaceful, their dot complete. He told me the barrier needed a replacement. He told me the river demands balance. He told me iron never forgets flesh. He asked me to take his place. He said blood must seal the rust. The water began to rise. Current pulled at my legs. The barrier groaned like a living thing. My father stepped backward into the river. his body dissolve into black water. The iron bars snapped shut. The river calmed instantly. Silence fell heavy and final. The villagers emerged slowly. No one spoke. They buried my clothes near his old grave. They carved my name into stone. The river has not flooded since. At night, I stand beneath the water. Caught in the barrier, I wait. Watch, and someday, after many years, I will walk home again.